Central thesis. What happened in the 3 days of testing in Bahrain was not simply a good adaptation of Lewis Hamilton to the SF-26, but an unexpected demonstration of technical control and speed that surprised Ferrari internally and changed the narrative balance against Charles Leclerc from the first kilometer. For 3 days, Ferrari accumulated more than 120 laps per day, without serious reliability problems, while Hamilton fine-tuned rear stability, traction in slow corners and electrical management as if he were ordering the project from within. And that's where the real question arises. Has a new internal hierarchy just begun at Maranello before the season even starts? The pre-season tests at the Bahrain International Circuit do not usually produce champions, but they do reveal uncomfortable truths. And in 2025, during 3 intense days of work, Ferrari not only sought to confirm that the SF-26 was competitive, he sought to see if Lewis Hamilton could adapt with real speed to a car completely different from anything he had driven in recent years. The previous narrative spoke of a long learning process, of understanding Maranello's own hybrid systems, of adjusting braking style, of modifying lines. But from the first day, something began to break that planned script. The first day started with complex conditions. Strong crosswind, high temperatures on the asphalt and a track that was still green, with little accumulated grip. Ferrari structured the program by dividing tasks between Hamilton and Leclerc, prioritizing data correlation and evaluation of medium compounds, especially C2 and C3. It wasn't about looking for headlines, but about understanding the real basis of the SF-26. However, in the midst of that methodical work, Hamilton began to make subtle but significant differences. It was not an isolated explosive turn. It was the way in which, even with low grip, it maintained stability in the corner entry phase and achieved surprisingly clean traction on slow exits, one of Ferrari's historically delicate points. While other teams were dealing with small reliability problems or interruptions in their programs, Ferrari chained more than 120 laps in the day without serious incidents. That information is key, because it allowed Hamilton to enter deeper territory. Long runs, degradation management, reading aerodynamic behavior with changing load. And that's where the internal surprise began. Sector by sector, the British showed consistency, but also detected micro-behaviors of the car that were not completely reflected in the simulation models. Differential adjustments, small changes in brake balance and modifications to the electrical delivery began to transform the balance of the SF-26. The second day he raised the level. With greater accumulation of rubber on the track and a more representative environment, Hamilton recorded a 1 minute and 34.2 seconds that placed him in the front group, half a second off the absolute best time, but with both Ferraris very compact in performance. What was relevant was not the exact number but the pattern. In long runs, his pace did not drop abruptly. Rear stability was kept under control and the tire thermal management seemed tidier when he was behind the wheel. Ferrari was able to complete more than 130 combined laps between both drivers, reinforcing the feeling of structural reliability of the SF-26. And this is where the true core of the act begins to be drawn. Hamilton wasn't just adapting. I was helping to organize the car. The SF-26, as shown these days, is a single-seater with a very high-performance ceiling, especially strong on a straight line thanks to the efficiency of the engine and highly tuned electrical management. But it is also a sensitive car, which requires precision in load transfer and in the use of the accelerator in critical phases. What surprised Ferrari was how quickly Hamilton understood that duality: aggressive on the straight, delicate in transition. On the third day, with more race simulations and variable fuel loads, the picture was completed. Ferrari did not seek the media hit of the absolute best time, but rather to consolidate data. And in that process, Hamilton once again stood out in consistency. He didn't make mistakes, he didn't force unnecessary locks, and he maintained a clean line even when the wind altered the aerodynamic behavior. Internally, that changed the tone. Because the initial expectation was a progressive adaptation, perhaps with ups and downs. Instead, what they saw was a pilot capable of squeezing out the real potential of the SF-26 from the first official test. Thus, after 3 days in Bahrain, Ferrari not only came away with a reliable and competitive car. It came out with a new variable in the internal equation. A Hamilton that is not in a slow learning phase, but in immediate construction mode. And that, before the season starts, silently alters the balance within the red box. If the first act showed us that Hamilton understood the SF-26 faster than expected, the second act reveals something even more important: how that adaptation began to alter Ferrari's internal dynamics and redefine the team's technical approach after just 3 days in Bahrain. Because there is a huge difference between being fast and changing conversations inside the box. During the long runs of the second and third day, Ferrari began to run more representative race simulations. High fuel, demanding thermal management, changing wind on the main straight and increasing degradation on the rear axle. It is in that context where a pilot really influences the direction of development. And what Hamilton did was expose both the potential and weaknesses of the SF-26 with surgical clarity. The car showed two very marked faces. On the one hand, outstanding straight-line efficiency, good top speed, highly optimized electrical management and active aerodynamics that allow unloading without excessively penalizing in the middle curve. On the other hand, a narrow operating window when the rear balance is compromised by the wind or by the drop in grip in the final phase of the stints. That kind of behavior can turn a fast car into an unpredictable car. And this is where the Hamilton factor comes in. Instead of fighting against that sensitivity, he began to modulate it. He adjusted his way of attacking the corner entry, was progressive in the use of the accelerator in long support and requested small differential changes that stabilized traction in slow exit. They were not radical modifications. They were micro adjustments. But the result was visible in the data. Less oscillation in lap times on long runs, more linear degradation and cleaner management of the rear axle. Internally, that changes a lot. Because Ferrari didn't just see that the car was competitive. He saw that, in the right hands, the SF-26 could be more stable than it initially appeared. And that directly impacts future development. When a pilot accurately identifies which part of the behavior is structural and which is adjustable via setup, it speeds up the engineer's work. Hamilton wasn't just driving, I was classifying problems. Meanwhile, Leclerc maintained a solid, fast performance in line with expectations. But the surprise didn't come from Charles, it came from the pace with which Hamilton was aligning the car to his style without sacrificing consistency. Instead of forcing the SF-26 into extreme behavior, he was commanding it within its optimal window. And that begins to raise an uncomfortable but inevitable question. Who is really setting the technical direction of the project from the beginning? The third day confirmed the trend. Ferrari prioritized program stability, data collection and complete simulations without seeking absolute time. And in that context, Hamilton once again stood out in control, cleanliness and reading the race. There were no visible errors, no unnecessary blocks or wide exits under pressure. Method only. And when a team sees method in a new environment, the perception changes. Ferrari finished the Bahrain tests with a reliable, competitive car with room for improvement. But also with something more difficult to measure. An internal feeling that the project can scale faster than expected because the newly arrived driver is already speaking the technical language of the car. The SF-26 is not a simple single-seater. He has a high ceiling but demands precision. And in 3 days, Hamilton not only understood it, he began to shape it. Because the tests do not give points. They don't give out trophies. They do not define championships. But they do build internal narratives. And at Ferrari, what happened with the SF-26 and Hamilton was not a simple successful adaptation. It was a silent declaration of intent. After completing 3 clean days with more than 120 laps per day and without serious structural problems, Ferrari left Bahrain with something it has not always had in the last decade, a solid base. The SF-26 demonstrated reliability, reasonable balance and above all high straight-line potential thanks to its energy efficiency and highly tuned electrical management. It is not a capricious car in mechanical terms. It is demanding an aerodynamic window, yes, but it is not fragile. And that changes the starting point. Now, the real twist is in how that car began to be interpreted. Hamilton wasn't just fast. Not only did he maintain pace in long runs, what he ended up doing in these 3 days was redefining the internal perception of the true ceiling of SF-26. Because when a driver shows that he can maintain consistency even when the wind alters the balance, when the track loses grip and when degradation begins to appear, the message is clear. The car has more margin than it seemed. And that directly influences development. Ferrari now does not work from doubt. Work from confirmation that the package has real potential. And when a technical team knows that the car responds well to micro adjustments of balance, differential and electrical management, the evolutionary approach becomes more aggressive. It is no longer about correcting a weak concept. It is about optimizing a competitive one. But here is the most delicate point. The external narrative could speak of equality between Hamilton and Leclerc after the tests. However, internally, the psychological impact exists. Because when a newly arrived driver does not need months to understand the complexity of the car, but in 3 days begins to organize his behavior, he inevitably alters the emotional balance of the box. It doesn't mean that Leclerc is over. It means that the internal reference is no longer one-sided. Hamilton didn't need half a season to understand the car's behavior. In 3 days he showed consistency in long stints, stability in complicated conditions, and, above all, the ability to classify what was the real limitation of the car and what was simply a matter of setup. That difference is enormous, because a driver who commands the car accelerates development. And a driver who accelerates development changes the internal dynamics of the team. Ferrari leaves Bahrain with something it did not always have in recent years: clarity. Clarity on the potential of SF-26. Clarity about its reliability. And clarity that he has a 7-time champion capable of squeezing him out without a prolonged adaptation window. The season has not officially started yet. There are no points distributed. There is no real racing pressure. But what Bahrain left is a silent warning for the grid. Ferrari not only has a car, it has direction. Leave me in the comments what you think about all this.